Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day today to join us. Today's session is an introduction to PDF accessibility and is being recorded for future on-demand viewing. A Q&A pod is going to appear here on the left for you to send us any questions that you might have. Also, in the top right corner, you'll see some arrows, and you can click on these arrows to move the presentation into full screen mode. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to our presenter, Rob Haverty. Rob, take it away.
Thank you, Lori. So my name is Rob Haverty. Many of you already know me, and some of you have taken some of my previous classes. We decided to kick off this six series of PDF accessibility to try to enable people to get the information in a more ready manner. We are recording this, so you'll get access to the recording as well. So you can always go back and check things out. The session today is kind of an intro, and what I really want to do today is just give you the basics about PDF accessibility and Acrobat Pro DC. Everything that we're going to be doing over the next 6 sessions, which will happen over the next 12 weeks, so we'll do one every 2 weeks, is based on Acrobat Pro DC, the continuous version. The reason we're doing that is because over the last 2 years we've worked pretty hard to improve the workflow and make it easier for you to make PDF documents accessible. So I want to introduce you to the things you need to know about Acrobat Pro DC today so that you're ready in the subsequent sessions to actually dive into fixing PDFs. As we mentioned at the top, my name is Rob Haverty. I've been doing accessibility for over 20 years now. A number of those years were spent at Microsoft, so I know a bit about Microsoft's products and Office accessibility. I've been at Adobe now for almost 3 years, and my focus at Adobe has been almost exclusively on PDF. So I had the opportunity 3 years ago to kind of be where some of you are today, in that kind of my first entrance to PDF accessibility. And I felt all the pain. So out of that has come the improvements we've made and the sessions that I have been doing over the last couple of years, the live sessions, and now we're moving these into webinars to make it easier for folks. So I'm actually going to switch over to sharing my screen. We will begin in the deck. I want to go through some basics of PDF accessibility, but then I'm going to step out of the deck and actually do some live demos both in Word and in Acrobat Pro DC. Let's go full screen with this so you have a good view. All right, so let's talk a little bit about why and what's going on, in sort of in the compliance world with regard to PDF accessibility. In the United States, and you'll see on a secondary slide that this is true worldwide, so it doesn't matter where you are located in the world. Accessibility has become a legal requirement in most countries around the world. In the United States, we have a law that we call the Americans with Disabilities Act. And although it does not specifically speak to technology or specifically speak to websites or documents today, it does require equal access for people with disabilities, and the Justice Department in the United States has interpreted that to mean, and has issued a number of memoranda saying that websites and the content on websites are covered. Many times when people are accessing PDF documents, it may be through a website. And so certainly in that regard, the law is on the side of those need to be accessible. Now, I'm not an attorney, and I do recommend people speak to their own legal departments as to how your organization is interpreting the laws. But I just want to make you aware of the fact that there really is this overriding, and whether it be in the United States or other countries, there's an overriding principle of accessibility and equal access for people with disabilities. Now, in the United States, and again, in other countries, there are other laws on the books that speak a little bit more to the accessibility of technology. And in the U.S., one of those is Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. And this gives us a number of requirements for technology and accessibility. When we start talking about content, again, pretty much every law in the world, and again in the United States, point to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These have been around for a long time. They are an ISO standard, so they are an international standard, and they set out criteria on how to make content accessible. When we talk about PDF specifically, there is a PDF standard, which is an ISO standard, and there is a subset of that standard called PDF UA, or Universal Access, that gives you greater detail on how to make a PDF document accessible. Now, one of the things that kind of keep in mind is, although it is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, in most laws and regulations today worldwide, you can kind of drop the word web because it has been expanded to cover all content. And so from that standpoint, we really look to that, whether you are posting a PDF on the web or you are sending a PDF in email, the same rules apply. The reality is, however, that compliance is really just the start. And at the end of the day, it is about the user experience and how people are able to access information. And so we are constantly working to improve that, and you want to keep that in mind when you are actually working on your PDF documents. So as I mentioned, there are standards worldwide. In Canada, there's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Europe has the EN 301549, which is similar to Section 508 in the U.S. Disability Discrimination Act in many countries like the UK and Australia, which are similar to the Americans with Disabilities Act in the US. All of these are driven out of, today, are driven out of a convention that came out of the UN on rights of persons with disabilities, and there is an organization called the Global Initiative for Inclusive Information and Communication Technologies, G3ICT, who have worked extensively over the last 5 years with governments around the world to harmonize the standards and make sure that we really can do it once and know that it's good everywhere. So pretty much, when you're thinking about PDF accessibility, if you look at WCAG and if you look at the PDF UA standards, you're going to be good to go. So let's talk a little bit more about this PDF UA. As I mentioned, it's a subset of ISO 32000, and it is focused on providing information about the text, the structure of the document, and the organization of the content so that assistive technologies can access that and expose that to their users. So for example, a screen reader would need to know, is it a list? Is it a table? What's the layout of that table? All that information that you would see visually needs to be exposed within the document structure and within the PDF UA information. One of the things about standards that has always sort of bothered me, I kind of want my standards to be dictators. I want them to say, you must do this. And they don't always. Sometimes they say you shall or you must, and sometimes they say you should or you may. And one example of this, which we will talk about more in the second session, has to do with lists. And in the PDF UA standard, you must have a list tag and a list item tag. Don't worry if you don't know what those are yet. We will be going into those. But the label tag and the L-body tag are not required. You may include those if you want to. So I really encourage you to look to your organizations, because different organizations have defined how these need to be done for themselves. Additionally, the PDF UA standard is under revision now, and there are some things that are conventions today that we may see coming in the future. One of those is a document tag. To be able to actually start the document with a document tag allows the user to know that they're in a full document and not in part of a document. Some of the other things is how we address artifacting images with captions. And again, we'll talk more about that in the second session, which will be in 2 weeks. So here's one of the things that used to be a little more scary, which is why I said here there be monsters, and I have this image of sort of an old map when we didn't know the world was round and you had dragons and monsters at the end of the world. This used to be more important than it is today, but I want to go through this and give you a sense of where there are things that you should be thinking about before you tag a document. So the very first thing is it a scanned document? If it's scanned, then it is an image. And if it's an image, you can do absolutely nothing with it from an accessibility standpoint. Well, theoretically, you could add an alt text to that image, which is the whole document, which would be onerous at best. But basically, you cannot do anything with that until you actually have performed text recognition or optical character recognition. So that is one of the absolutes. You have a scanned document, you cannot make it accessible until you've done text recognition. Is it a form? Does it have fillable form fields? This is one of those where there's kind of a 50-50 option here. It may be, depending on the type of your document and the type of your form, that it is easier to do the form fields first and then tag the entire document. And when we get into the forms sessions 5 and 6, we'll talk more about that. But just know that you have an option here. Does it contain links? Again, it's easier if your links are all identified in the document prior to tagging it. That does not mean that you can't go back and fix it afterwards. So this just makes it easier. Does it have multimedia? You need to make sure the multimedia is accessible and has captions and video descriptions before you tag the document. Now you can tag the document. Now, once you have tagged the document, if you go back and edit that document, you may run into some challenges, even as much as just corrupting the tag tree and having to start all over again, retagging the document. There are some things today that you can do with tagged documents that will not corrupt the tag tree. You can reorganize that document. You can move pages around. You can take a fully tagged page and insert it. You can delete pages, and the tag tree will automatically adjust. We're working on allowing you to insert paragraphs, insert list items, delete paragraphs, and do things like that, and have that also auto-adjust the tag tree and auto-tag. Stay tuned. I'm hoping we'll see that come out this year. It's been a little bit more complex from an engineering standpoint than we had initially hoped. All right, so this is the most important thing of the entire day. If you don't remember anything else, remember that the source document is supreme. The old adage of garbage in, garbage out is never more true than when you're talking about a PDF document coming from a source. If the source document is inaccessible, there is no magic silver bullet that's going to automatically make that PDF document accessible. And the more inaccessible the source document is, the more work that you will have to do once you get to the PDF itself. So whenever possible, if you have the source document, you might find it easier to address the issues in the source document first and then reconvert it to a PDF. A couple of things to be aware of, though. First of all, does the authoring tool even allow you to create an accessible version? Not all authoring tools for all document formats have tools to really help you do that. Word, for example, does. It has a built-in accessibility checker that will help you, and it has styles that you can use to make sure that things are accessible. Secondly, and this is actually probably the biggest gotcha, is does the author know how to create an accessible document in the first place? In my experience, probably not. When I worked at Microsoft, I think I'm being generous by saying less than 5% of the people I knew how to create an accessible Word document, even though we had an accessibility checker built in. So your author may not know. And I always recommend when teaching people about accessibility to start by teaching them how to make the source document accessible. Don't start with PDF. It is almost always easier to remediate the source document than the PDF. I have run into some examples where it was going to be a lot harder to do it in the source document, and I did it in the PDF. But in general, I think it's a fairly good rule of thumb that the source document is where you should do the work first. All right, so you have your source document, and we're going to assume at this point in time that we have an accessible source document, and we need to convert it to a PDF. There are lots of ways to do that, and there are lots of things to know about how you're going to do that. And I'm going to show you some of the steps in doing that from Word. So some of the things to be aware of. There, for some products like Microsoft Office, Acrobat has actually created a plugin where we are using our interpretation of the PDF UA standard to convert from a Word document into an accessible PDF document. The application itself may have a save as, which allows you to save it as a PDF, and in that case, they will convert to a tagged PDF. Office does a really good job of that with their save as. It will be different, slightly different in the tagging than what you get from the Acrobat plugin because it is Microsoft's interpretation. And so you might want to play with these and see which one is giving you the best results for the types of documents you use. Now, sometimes a save as ends up resulting in an untagged PDF because that application has not done the work to understand tagging a PDF document. So again, you kind of need to know where your source is coming from and how it is converting it to a PDF. You can export. Typically, an export is going to use whatever conversion engine the application has. So if you're using Acrobat to export to a PDF, you'll get our tool. If you're using Office to export to a PDF, you'll get the Office's tool. Print to PDF always results in an untagged and therefore inaccessible PDF. This kind of goes back to that hierarchy of tasks. Sometimes I may want my document to be untagged before I start working on it. So I may use print to PDF to do that. And then there are other conversion tools. There are other companies who've made plugins either to Acrobat or have standalone applications that do conversions as well. What I have found over the last almost 3 years is documents are unique, and different organizations tend to have a different structure for their documents, and you need to find what's the best way for you to do it. I like using the Acrobat plugin in Word, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be the best solution for your situation. So don't be afraid to play around and see which tool results in the best tagging for you. Some things to note. You will get varying results. Tables and lists are two areas in particular that you're going to get different results depending upon the tool, and sometimes they may actually be inaccurately tagged and require more work. You may end up with an untagged PDF, which we talked about with either print, or even some of the applications that have a save as will be an untagged PDF. Or you may get custom tags, which then need to be mapped to standard tags. PDF UA is very specific in what a tag looks like, how it should be formatted. And if it is not formatted in exactly that way, if you're supposed to use a capital P and you use for a paragraph tag and you use a lowercase p, it's not a paragraph tag, and it would be considered a custom tag, and the assistive technology would not know what to do with that. All right, so let's swap out of here for a moment and actually go into Word. And these documents and everything should be posted, so you'll be able to access this and play with these on your own as well. So let's start with converting using the Acrobat plugin. Now, you'll notice up here in the ribbon, across the tabs at the top of the ribbon, there is one that says Acrobat. If you have Acrobat installed on your system, you will get this Acrobat plugin automatically. Sometimes Office will prompt you to disable it, and that's your choice if you don't want to use it, but it'll be there in the tab bar. And we also have an icon over here for Document Cloud, which will also allow you to convert to a PDF, a tagged PDF, and it has some other tools in there as well. You can also go to File up in the left side of the ribbon, and you'll see a Save as Adobe PDF in the File menu. So we have done everything we possibly can to make sure that you can find the Acrobat version of converting to a PDF. So let's click on the Acrobat in the toolbar, or I'm sorry, in the ribbon, the Acrobat tab, and you'll notice a ribbon comes up for Acrobat, and there's a whole lot of stuff in there. And you can explore those. The reality is, all that you really need is create PDF. You can go into preferences if you want to, and a lot of us like to see what our preferences are. I encourage you to leave the preferences set the way that we have set them. By and large, our default settings throughout Acrobat and the PDF experience are good. So there usually is no reason to change those. I do want to show you one, however, which is called Enable Advanced Tagging. That sounds really cool. Advanced must be better. Well, it's not. Advanced is going to give you some tags that is going to create some challenges for you in making sure that that tag tree looks right. So I always leave that off. There are advantages to it, but not typically in working with a PDF. So we're going to cancel out of that and go to our Create PDF. So I click on Create. It's going to ask me to save it. I'm going to save it with, append it with delete so that I know to go back and get rid of this. I would encourage you, if you're working with the documents that we've provided you, always save them as something else so you don't overwrite the samples. I'm going to say Save. Going to do some magic in the background and tell me that it is converting. And then it will automatically open it up in Acrobat. Now, don't worry about Acrobat for a moment. We will come back to some of the details on Acrobat. What I want to show you is there's a little luggage tag icon. When I click on that, it expands, and I get my tag tree. And because I created an accessible Word document, I have my H1 tag for my heading, first heading. I have a P tag or a paragraph tag for the paragraph. I have an H2 tag for my next heading. I use the styles. I can go down to a list, and I have my list tag. I can go down to my table, and I have my table tag. Everything gets tagged correctly based upon the work that I did in Acrobat. Now, I want to show you another option here. Sometimes you may end up with an untagged PDF. And we're going to pretend this is untagged by deleting the tags. And the way I do that is I select the root tag, and I right-click, and I say delete tag. And that's going to delete them all. Now, I'm going to save. It's a little bit longer process in Word these days. Because whenever I do something major, I like to save. It sort of clears the buffer, and I make sure I'm working with the right document. All right, so let's scroll back up to the top of our document. Now, if I'm in this state and I want to tag it, I can either go over to the right here to the accessibility tool, and I can select auto tag. I'm going to close that for the moment. Oops. Or I can just select no tags available, right click, and say add tags to document. So I've added my tags. I go back to my tag tree, and we're going to see now a new set of tags. When we converted directly from Word and tagged it out of Word, we took all of the structure information that Word gave us, all the work you did there to make it accessible, so we knew when it was in H1 because Word told us it was in H1. When we do it this way within Acrobat itself, we no longer have all of that structure information. And so essentially, we have some heuristics and we have some machine learning we're using, but essentially we're guessing. And we're going to guess wrong sometimes. You're going to see over the next year, I think, we're going to have some improvements that are going to make this a lot better. But for now, you're going to get some errors. So you'll notice that very first heading, which should be an H1, it came out as an H3 because the font is a blue, which is kind of a light color. And so we thought, well, the weight of that font, it doesn't really look like an H1. So we made it an H3. The next one down there, which was my H2 headings, is a P tag because it was even lighter. We go down to our list. We seem to have gotten the list. We seem to have gotten the table. We were able to figure out that those existed. But not everything is going to be correct. So you're going to get a difference between the two different ways of tagging a document in Conversion or within Acrobat itself. All right, so let's take a look at a couple other things. Oops. Lost my Word document. All right, so print. I just want to show you when we go to print, so I clicked on File in the ribbon, and then I select Print from the File menu. And in the printer, I'm going to select Adobe PDF. And now I'm going to say Print. Now we're not technically printing here because we're really doing a save, but I will say Print. It's going to ask me to save it. Converting it, it opened it. I go to that tag tree again, and you see no tags available. So when we do a print, we end up with no tags. All right, I'm going to close some of these documents that I have open. One of the things that I have found in Acrobat is it can only handle so many documents at a time. And if I have too many documents open, it may crash on me or freeze up. And so a lot of times I will go ahead and just close documents when I'm not working on them anymore. All right, let's go back to our Word document, and let's do a file, and we're going to do Save As this time. So now we're going to use Office's interpretation of the standard, and we're going to Save As, and we're going to select in the drop-down PDF, and I'm going to change my name to Office Suite. And sometimes when you do it through the Office Save As, it will not actually open up automatically in Acrobat. So here we are in Acrobat now, and we're going to look at that tag tree again with that document that came from the Office conversion. You're going to notice another difference. They actually put the document tag at the head of the document. We've got our H1, we've got our P tag, we've got our list. So again, pretty much there may be some differences in the details of how lists are done, but again, pretty much we've gotten everything tagged. Now, in the second session, we're going to go through some of the things that we're going to have to fix on that. But just wanted to show you the different ways that you can actually convert from a PDF. So, as I showed you, and there's a slide in the deck here that does the same thing, we have PDF Maker, which is the plugin in Word, and we have Make Accessible, which is the tool within Acrobat. And we ended up with different results in the tag tree. So you need to remember that you'll get different results depending upon how you get to a tagged document. All right, let's talk a little bit about actually reading a PDF document using a screen reader. So there are a number of variables that impact this. The first one is the quality of the tagging of the PDF itself. A screen reader will attempt to infer a reading order and try to read a document if it's not tagged, but it will not have all the structure information. It will not know a list is a list. It will not do tables. It just cannot do a good job. And so there's a high dependency upon how good that tagging is for that PDF document. The second variable is the screen reader itself. Not all screen readers are created equal, and not all screen readers fully support all of the PDF UA tags. So even though you've done it right, a screen reader may not be reading it completely. And it depends on whether you're on a mobile device and you're using Android TalkBack, or whether you're on a Windows device and you're using JAWS, or you're using NVDA. Every screen reader will give you slightly different results. And so if you have a user who is complaining that you have a document that they're not able to read with their screen reader, and you know you've done a great job of tagging it, find out what screen reader they're using, and maybe suggest they try a different one. There are free screen readers available that do a good job. The PDF reader itself, and I have reader in quotes here because there are lots of tools out. The original one was Adobe Reader, and that was the PDF reader. And the Adobe Reader on desktop does a really good job. The Adobe Reader on mobile doesn't yet have full support for all the tags. So depending upon how you're using or what you're using, you may get different results. But every browser has its own PDF reader. Apple has its own PDF reader, and they all have a different sense and a different support for the PDF UA tags. And so again, depending upon how you are reading that document, the same document read in a browser may read entirely differently and not as well as if you read it in Adobe Reader. So you kind of have to understand that complexity as well. If you have someone who's saying, hey, it's not reading for me, that may be why. And as I mentioned before, if you have an untagged document, it's going to try to guess, and it's not going to do a great job. There is a tool built in to Acrobat called Read Out Loud. That is not a screen reader. You should not rely upon it for testing the completion or the accuracy of your tagging. Again, it was created a long time ago, kind of as a stopgap, but do not think of it as a screen reader. I do not recommend its use. So, where can I get the best results? First of all, a fully tagged, well-tagged, accessible PDF document, one that's been tagged for PDF UA. Secondly, NVDA screen reader. It's a free screen reader from NV Access. It is an open source screen reader, so it's been supported by a lot of companies like Microsoft and Google and Adobe. And we've actually paid them and funded them so that they would fully support the PDF UA standard. So we know that if I have my fully tagged PDF and I run it with NVDA, it should read correctly. And then using the desktop version of Acrobat Reader. All right, so let's go back to Acrobat itself. I'm going to close out of that. We're going to go back to our Home tab. Now, if you haven't seen it before, there's some new things in Acrobat. If you're back in using Acrobat 11 or 10, you're not going to get this layout. And we've changed some things. We have a Home tab. And there's a lot of things in that Home tab that are interesting. One of the most valuable for me is the fact that I get a list of my recent documents, so I can quickly go and open a document. We also have a Tools tab. And the first thing you're going to want to do when you go into Acrobat Pro DC for the first time is go to that Tools tab. And you'll notice in my Tools pane, I have the Accessibility tool and the Action Wizard. Those are not there by default. So you need to actually scroll all the way down to the bottom of the Tools pane and find the Accessibility tool and the Action Wizard. And I already have them over here, so I don't have the Add option anymore, but you'll notice for print production there's an Add. And so all I would do is click on Add, and it will appear. Let's add print production for fun. It'll appear at the bottom of the list. Now, I have resorted my list and put all of the accessibility tools, all the tools that I use for creating accessible PDFs at the top. You can sort them however you like. Today, the only way to sort them is drag and drop. There is no keyboard way to sort those tools, and I apologize for that. So I have sorted them, and I've added my accessibility tool and my Action Wizard. There are actually a good 5 tools that I use regularly in working with PDFs. And in subsequent sessions, we will go through these in greater detail. But there is the accessibility tool itself. And let's go back to Home, and let's open a document and my Tools pane. One of the things, if you have been using Acrobat, you may notice in the version that came out, I believe, in November, we've added the icons visible all the time. You can expand this to get the actual name of the tool. If I go into the accessibility tool, there's a lot of stuff in here. The auto tagging, which I showed you earlier for if you have an untagged document. Full check, this is our accessibility checker. And setting alternate text. These are the 3 things that I typically use in that tool. The Action Wizard itself has a Make Accessible Action Wizard, which will actually walk you through the steps of taking a document, recognizing text or running text recognition, detecting the form fields, and all of the steps that you need. You need to make sure that if you're doing this, you do it on an untagged PDF. If you do it on a tagged PDF, you may run into some challenges. I'm going to close that. It's going to ask me if I didn't complete. Enhanced scans. We'll talk a lot about this, I think, in the 4th session. We do scan documents. This is what I use for my scan documents. Edit PDF. Only time I use this is for links, which you can't actually see because it just says LI because of the font size I'm using. And then prepare form, which we will spend 2 whole sessions on how to make forms accessible. So those are kind of your tools. So we've added our tools, talked about what those tools are. Now let's go back into our document here. And you'll notice I kept clicking on this luggage tag icon, which brings up the tag tree. When you go into Acrobat for the first time, you will not have the bottom 3 icons here. The content panel, the order panel, and the tag panel or the tag tree. In order to add those, you need to go up to View, Show Hide, Navigation Panes, and then select Content. And when you do that, it will all close, and you go back to View, Show Hide, Navigation Panes, and Add Order, and then you'll do the same thing again for tags to get all 3 of those tags added. I'm working on getting those in there by default, but for now, these are some of the steps you'll need to go through to set up Acrobat. Now, notice in the slide deck itself, I have provided all of these steps so that you're able to do this again on your own. All right, let's take a look at the reading order tool. Now, one of the things to note, and you'll hear me say this probably multiple times as we go through the trainings over the next 6 sessions, there are lots of different ways in Acrobat to actually accomplish a task. And different people have their favorite ways, and we all think it differently, and so different ways are going to work better for some than others. So the way I'm going to show you is the way I do it. Now, I am at heart a lazy person, and I like to find the shortest possible path to success. So I'm going to show you my way. But when someone sees you doing it and says, no, 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 that's completely wrong, you should be doing it this way, it's not wrong, it's just different. And their way may actually work better for you. So don't be afraid to, again, experiment and try things out. Now, in the old days, in order to get to what was called the touch-up reading order tool, which is now just called the reading order tool, you would actually go into the order panel using this Z order icon. You would go to the drop-down menu, and you would select Show Reading Order Panel, and up would pop the tool. In my worldview, I tend to live almost exclusively in the tag tree. The PDF UA standard says that the tag tree must be in the logical reading order. And screen readers are looking to the tag tree for that reading order. So to me, this is the most important place to be. And since I'm already in the tag tree, I can either select its drop-down menu and go directly to the reading order tool, or if I'm on a tag itself, I can right-click and go to the context menu, hit the letter X. We have a hotkey. We're starting to add hotkeys to all of our new menu items, and we'll go back and add them to the old ones, and it'll bring up the reading order tool. Now, what I want to show you here is the bottom part. This is the way that I like to have my reading order tool set up. There are times when you may want to alternate between page content order and structure types. Structure types will show you what's in the tag tree. Page content order will, but it won't always. It's not going to always match one-to-one to the tag tree because it's bringing a different type of structure type. Page content order tells me what the reading order is and what the order of this document is. Show table cells, you always want that on. I turn display like elements in a single block off. You can turn it on, but what I have found is sometimes mistagged items get hidden from my view when I have this on. And then show tables and figures should be checked on. So this is the way I recommend that you set up your reading order tool. And again, we have it in the deck itself. Now let's go to the table editor. Again, in the old days, I would go to the Z order. I would select the drop down. I would go to Show Reading Order Panel. I would scroll down to find my table in my document. And there was, I swear, it was a 4-pixel wide space square over here somewhere to the left of table that I had to select in order to activate the table editor. That's a long way to get there, and it also doesn't, we have improved this so that you don't have to click on that little tiny spot anymore. You can click anywhere in the table. But we're going to close that, and we're going to go back to our tag tree, because that's where I live. And I find my table in the tag tree. I can right-click, and there's Table Editor with the hotkey of Q. Hit Q. I'm now in my table editor, and I know that because I have all these colors on my table. So let's go look at the table editor option. I can click in any cell in the table, right-click, and go to Table Editor Options. Now, those of you who may not be on the newest version, this came out again last fall. There's a new checkbox here, Show Cells with Missing Header. And so you'll want to make sure that's checked, and you want to make sure that Show Cells that span multiple rows or columns are checked. Now, the colors that I have here for my cells are different than the default. The Show Cells with Missing Header was too close to me in color to the actual header cell color, and so it just got a little confusing to me, and so I changed that. I changed this one too because I liked something that was a little bit more distinct. I wanted to be able to really tell. Now, the optional one here, checkbox, is Show Cell Type. Typically, I have that on. And when I have that on, you'll see that I get my THs and my TDs. So we're showing that a table header cell is red, but we also have the TH so that I know that it's a table header cell. Sometimes, however, like in this case, it obscures too much of the actual cell, the text in the cell, and so I may go in and turn it off so that I can see what's going on in my cell. All right, so we're going to talk a lot about tables in sessions 2 and sessions 3, but I wanted to show you about setting up. Okay, let's just briefly, I want to talk about keyboard navigation. There's a link here for our keyboard shortcuts. There's a number of ways that you can navigate. Tab and arrow keys typically work. One of the great things that I think that we've done in Acrobat is the F6 key. When I hit F6, it will start on the home key, or the home tab, and you'll see a little dotted line around it. I hit it again. It goes to my broccoli. I hit it again. It goes down into my navigation pane. I hit it again. It's my invisible location because I'm actually in the document itself now. And I hit it again, and I'm over here in the Tools pane at the Search for Find Tools. So this allows me to navigate quickly through. One other thing I want to show you is Control D. Control D brings up our document properties. Lots of stuff in here we're not going to go over today. What I want to show you is this part right here. So have an application, and it says that I used Word was my source, and I used PDF Maker, Acrobat PDF Maker, to convert it. So this gives me an idea of some of the challenges I may have to face. All right, let's talk a little bit about, we've got 10 minutes left, so we're going to talk about testing and compliance testing. All right, so we have the built-in Acrobat Accessibility Checker. It does not fully verify WCAG conformance. There is no automated tool that will do that today. There are a number of tests, a number of criteria in WCAG that require manual testing. We bring some of those up in our accessibility checker as sort of a question mark, and it's like, you know, you might want to look at this. You might want to look at your color contrast. You might want to look at your reading order. We have some things that we're going to pop up, but you cannot get an automated test of WCAG conformance. Our tool today also does not fully verify PDF UA conformance. We will eventually get there, but the reality is there is a free tool available to do that, which is called PAC 3, the PDF Accessibility Checker. And so because there is something free available, in my perspective, when we're prioritizing work, I want to do the stuff that you can't get for free elsewhere, or things that are going to make your life easier in Acrobat, before adding something that is already available to you as a free tool. So PDF Accessibility Checker will give you a full check against the PDF UA standard. It will not fully verify for WCAG again. So you need to be aware of the limitations of the tools you're using. If you run the Acrobat Accessibility Checker and you pass everything, you can feel confident that you have an accessible document. A screen reader is going to, or another assistive technology is going to be able to handle that document and present that information. You do not necessarily have a fully PDF UA compliant document, however. So if that's your goal, you need to know that you need to run the additional checker. And then there are a ton of other checkers out there as well. There are lots of companies that make tools that you can use. And you may find some of those tools are more to your liking or do a better job on your types of documents. So certainly feel free. I don't want to imply that you absolutely have to use Acrobat and only Acrobat. It is not the be-all, end-all. So let's go into the document again, and let's run our accessibility checker. So we go over to the accessibility tool on the right, select that. It brings up a list of tools, and I want the full check. I click that. I'm going to come up with a bunch of options again. Default is all set, everything checked. That's really the way you want to leave it. I'm going to start checking, and I'm going to end up with my accessibility check. And I'm going to have two issues that will always be there: logical reading order and color contrast. Those are things that we are suggesting you take a look at because we cannot automatically check that. Stay tuned. An automated color contrast checker is coming. There is one available. There actually are several available online that are also free, so you can use a color contrast checker. One of the errors that you may get is title. There are two things in the PDF UA standard with regard to title accessibility. Number one, a document needs to have a title. And number two, the title of the document needs to show up in the window. By default, the file name shows up there. And we've all seen file names. In fact, some of us have created file names that are probably garbage to anybody other than ourselves because we know what our formatting is. That makes it really hard for a screen reader when it gets to the very top of the window and it reads XQY123, whatever, and not the title of the document. So it will come up as a fail. You can right-click, and it will give you the option to fix it. You select Fix. It will automatically change the flag for that. and then you will get your pass. Then the document title will show here. You'll need to save the document, close, and go back in order to get that document title in the window. All right, so in the deck, we have a number of resources that are helpful. One that I want to highlight is sort of in the middle of the page, the blog. Every time we have a release and we do something new to improve the workflow, improve the accessibility of the tool, I will write a blog, and it'll give you great detail how to use this new functionality. And so I encourage you to kind of stay tuned for those. And last but not least, my email address is here. You are free to contact me if you have issues with a document. I am happy to take a look at those. As we get these trainings out and we get these recordings out, I may refer people back to the actual trainings. We're also in the process of creating some online trainings, so stay tuned for that. But happy to help you with your problems. We have an accessibility website. If you're looking for compliance of our products, we have the accessibility compliance site. We have an accessibility channel. And I want to point out the PDF standards. So I've given you links. The ISO standard itself, which is humongous, is free. It was originally an Adobe standard, and when it became an ISO standard, we published it for free. The PDF UA standard, however, was created by the PDF Association, and it is not free, and so you will actually need to go out and purchase that. So if you have been putting questions into the chat, Lori will capture all of those for me, and I will answer them in email. So you will just do an email blast of the answers. If you have a very specific question you want to ask, feel free to email me directly. And I thank you for your time. Lori, do you have any closing comments?
No, unless they want to continue asking questions, you can feel free to submit them in the Q&A pod. But at this point, I think we're going to go ahead and conclude the audio portion of today's session. And we want to thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again at our next session.
In 2 weeks.
And we hope to see you again at our next session.
In 2 weeks.